Welcome. Tonight we have a presentation for you that outlines the purpose, approach, and schedule for the Joint Compatibility Transportation Plan. My name is Katie Ketterer, and I'm the city's representative for this project. I'm joined tonight by Michael Hornvent from Parametrics, and after the presentation, we'll have a question and comment session, which will be facilitated by Emily Welter, who's also from Parametrics. Emily is going to monitor the chat box, so if you need some help, she'll be there to help you. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce Mayor Greg Wheeler. Mayor?
Oh, just thank you, Katie, and thank you, everybody, this evening for attending. I look forward to this. I think we all look forward to coming up with some real solutions to congestion and parking problems that have plagued Bremerton since we were incorporated. And this is a first partnership that I know of where we will actually be in with the Navy working together to solve this problem. And so just thank you all so much. I will be cutting out a little bit early into another Zoom meeting, but I'm going to be cutting back in to hear the public input. This is really important. Part of the process is gathering your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, I hope you can all see my screen. And if so, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so first, a project overview. Bremerton has a really unique traffic and parking issues due to the Naval Base Kitsap Bremerton. We've got traffic surges, shift changes. We've got limited parking both inside and outside the fence line. We have older infrastructure that's really car focused. And Bremerton is growing. So these issues are going to continue to compound as we have more population growth. Other examples we have, there's 4,400 parking stalls on the base and over 22,000 workers and service members. Transportation for staff working on the base is critical for the mission of the base and for Homeland Security. So we need to find sustainable, reliable, and resilient traffic options for the city and the base. Another issue is that there are people who live in private homes near the base. And so our solutions need to consider both their use of their property and their livelihoods. So leaders at the city and at Naval Base Kitsap Bremerton have been looking at these issues with a multitude of separate projects and approaches. And we're now using this project to pull all of the information and more together to develop a systemic approach to solving the transportation and livability challenges. The city and the partner and the NBK Bremerton are partnering through a DoD grant to create a plan that will address these challenges. The project is 90% federally funded through a Department of Defense grant. And this will be about an 18-month time period that will allow the team to include clear consolidation of ideas, discover what's new, outline a phasing plan, and provide the right level of engagement with the public and community representatives. We've got some more detailed information about the schedule coming up. So, how will we get there? The goal is to integrate critical needs for operational efficiency for the base and the needs for the city to pursue plans for improved accessibility, livability, and economic growth. So what we'll do is we'll examine existing and future need for all transportation modes serving NBK Bremerton. And our horizon year for this planning is the year 2050. We'll brainstorm different solutions to resolve the deficits. We'll evaluate those options to mitigate transportation and parking demands, and we'll develop a prioritized implementation plan. We also have on this slide this great graphic, which describes well how all the different modes and issues intersect together. It's an ecosystem, if you will. You have transit, parking, traffic, active transportation, and all of that has to live under an umbrella of livability. So we need all of these solutions working together to create a balanced multimodal solution to these issues. Next up, we'll have Michael Hornvent tell us a little bit more about the project.
All right, thanks, Katie. So, I was just telling Tom I really miss being in person with you all. I wish that we could be together and walking from board to board. So, maybe we'll just imagine that we're all standing at a board and kind of having a conversation about this. And please do remember that if you have a question, to go down to the bottom of your screen with your mouse, and you'll find a little chat box, and you can click on that and then type in your questions. And like Katie said, Emily will keep track of those, and we'll be able to address your questions or comments. Even if you just have input, please share that with us as we go through this presentation. So like Katie said just a little bit ago, we have a work plan set up that will really integrate a lot of the work that's been done already. And this figure has a lot of information on it, and I'm going to kind of start from the left and move to the right. And over on the left, you can see that we took a copy of several of the reports that have been done throughout the city in the recent past that really kind of focused on some of the individual projects. So different corridors, like the one on the far left is SR 16. We did the 303 corridor study recently. Kitsap Transit's looking at some of their passenger ferry options. And so a lot of these individual projects are working, but our goal now is to take all of that work that's been done, kind of get our arms around it, and then bring it together and look to see what are the commonalities in each of those reports and the findings, and identify if there are any additional issues that maybe cross between those different studies, and what are those issues, identify the needs, and what are some desires that maybe have not been captured yet. And you can see that as you move kind of to the right under the section in the diagram, it says alternatives development study, where we're going to take all of that information, we're going to drop it into this bucket. And in that bucket, we're going to work with the community, and that's going to be the people that you can kind of see in the down arrow there. The first little set of heads and bodies says CSB. That's going to be the community sounding board. The community, and I'll talk a little bit more about who's in the community sounding board and what the role is, but they're really the key agencies and participants within the community who are going to help us with their knowledge outline what are some solutions that really address the issues and the needs. And then we're going to work with you through these open house venues to make sure that we get your input. We're going to talk with the council so that we make sure that there are no surprises for them, because as we've learned through our work that transparency is really our friend. So again, we'll get all the needs and issues and desires into our idea bucket, or that brainstorming process that Katie mentioned earlier. And our goal in this first project is to really outline what are some of the preferred alternatives that meet those needs, and put them in a priority order. So what of those projects or groups of projects can we put together that we can then get early benefits for both for the livability within the city as well as operations for the base and growth for the city, so that it's all strategic and working together, as that diagram earlier showed. What you can kind of see underneath along the top there, sorry, it says alternative development study. Then there's environmental final design, and then construction. That's kind of the timeline to really deliver a project. And again, ours is this first piece. We want to come up with a bunch of alternatives and projects with the priority order. The next step would be to secure funding that would take those through the environmental process at whatever level is needed, and get those into the design process, so that then the dollars can be secured to move into construction. And I think what's really important is right across the bottom of this diagram is where you can see public involvement. And that is a picture of everybody here. We're all going to be involved as we move through these different phases of a project delivery, and making sure that you're informed, as well as getting your input at the right level along each of these stages. So that's the current plan as we see it. And again, right now, our project is on the far left there for alternative development study, and getting preferred alternatives identified. Can we go to the next slide, Katie? So the Community Sounding Board, I mentioned that we're going to be working with them, and the participants are shown down along the bottom. I'm sorry, from each of the different agencies and groups that we're going to be working with. And really their purpose again is to make sure and share their expertise and their advice and their ideas. And I'd say expertise is key, because all of the folks working in the different agencies have been doing their jobs for a long time and really understand the nuances that are required to make their agencies operate effectively. And so we're going to really look for them to bring those that expertise and those ideas to the table, and then support and inform their constituency. So that's you folks. So however they can reach out to their staff within their agencies and the people who they represent, and bring the ideas and concerns to the table, so that we can talk about it and make sure that that helps us develop the right alternatives. And again, finally, we want to make sure that we all are working together to look for those commonalities across the different agencies, to make sure we find the right size solutions that meet the needs of the people, and make sure that we meet the needs of the base and their operations and resiliency, as Katie mentioned. So that's really the responsibility for this Community Sounding Board. And again, please reach out to them and ask your questions, and make sure that you're getting information from them as you need. So let's go to the next slide. So our project schedule, we purposely back this off of all of the details about what the project team is going to be doing on a daily basis, and kind of zoomed it out a little bit so that we could show you what the different agendas will be for each of our meetings with the Community Sounding Board, and then ultimately how that will come to you in the next couple of meetings. And so what you can see across the top on this diagram is the months of time that we're going to be moving through. Starting last month in January, we kicked off with the Community Sounding Board, and here we are in February in that kind of lower light green public open house with you. And you can see that the end goal is around the June of next year to have a final report completed. You'll see that between the first Community Sounding Board, so that upper line, the first Community Sounding Board meeting and the second, there's quite a gap there. And the reason for that is that we need to spend some time as a project team really making sure that we've got the right foundational material set up, so that we are building these project recommendations on the right foundation. Again, what are those needs and issues and input that we're getting from you, the public, as well as the agencies? And it's going to take a little bit of time to make sure we've got that all integrated well, so that we've got the right answers as we come into that second meeting. And so you can see that when we get into that meeting, our basic agenda is going to be to talk about results that we get from a public information survey that's been put out, and we'll share that with you in just a little bit. We're going to talk about any information we get from this open house. We really want to make sure that we are addressing your comments, and we talk about how we've addressed that in our work efforts. We'll talk about a draft set of issues and needs and make sure we've got it right. And then really hopefully have a pretty good list of preliminary projects that we want to talk about and make sure that we've developed those correctly and have the right pieces put together in the right areas. And then we'll probably have an idea about how we want to make sure we're selecting the right projects to move forward at the right time. And that'll be our conversation at second meeting. And we'll get some input. We'll go away, make some refinements to that information, go through and do some screening of the alternatives to get it down to a little bit more of a narrowed set that we can bring to you in the next open house. And we'll want to share, here's what we came with in the beginning. This is how it's screened down to the next few. And this is what we would present. And again, we'll share that with you so that we can get your input and comments about where we landed. We'll take your input, go away, make sure and do some more refinements before we come to our fourth meeting with the Community Sounding Board, where our goal is to really talk about what are those top 3 to 5 alternatives that we think are really going to bring the most bang for the buck early, and talk about a delivery process for those. We'll get comments from the Community Sounding Board. We'll come back to you and share what's been refined and make sure that we've got your input, and finally share that back with the Community Sounding Board for one last set of updates where we'll have a phasing program, cost estimates, so that we can really have an understanding about what levels of grants or other funding sources will need to be pursued in order to complete the projects. And then, as I said, after that fifth meeting, we're going to really work towards getting that final report that's going to have to go through several review processes to ultimately be final. So that's kind of what you're going to see in your next couple of open houses is really you're going to watch the progression of how these alternatives are developed and refined to get to a preferred alternative. And again, we'll share with you how we've incorporated your comments and ideas. Katie, go to the next slide. So how can you help? It's kind of like beating the drum here. Definitely, we need you to participate in a public information survey. You can see the web address on the screen. And if you got a pencil and paper, go ahead and jot that down. Or if you know how to do a screenshot, go ahead and get that. We're going to post this also on the city's website, that you can see that address about 2/3 of the way down the page there at bremerton.gov/JCTP. And you'll be able to go there and find the access to the public information survey, as well as a lot of information about the project. So we'll encourage you to go out there and take that public information survey, please. Attend these open house venues and tell your friends to attend these open house venues so that they can bring their ideas as well. Or even if everybody's saying the same thing and we're hearing the same thing, it just reinforces the ideas have some support. And so that's a good thing too. Reach out to your Community Sounding Board members. They're there to help you and they represent you. So please feel free to reach out to them with your ideas and thoughts and concerns. Again, go to the website, make sure that you get on there and there's a comment section at the bottom of the page, and you'll be able to submit your ideas and questions there as well, so that we can stay apprised as to what you're thinking as the project moves forward. Okay. And then I'm going to get to this next slide. This is really going to be what you're going to see basically in this public information survey. We're going to ask you a lot of questions. And I will say this, the survey is going to be really focused mostly on the people who have work trips into and out of the city. And so when you get in there and do the survey, if most of your trips are really related to an entertainment trip, we're probably not going to get, I don't think you'll get this origin destination map. If it's a work trip, you'll see this origin destination map come up, and we're going to ask you, what zone do you live in and what zone do you work in? We don't want to know addresses. So So this isn't going to ask you any real personal information that will target anybody. It's just bigger zone level information that helps us understand what roadways are going to be used mostly for what purposes, and then how do people really, you all want to travel? I mean, are you driving today, but you'd really rather ride a bike or take a bus, or do you really like to drive? So those are kind of questions that we're going to be asking. So that's what that modes of travel. It's a little jargony, but modes of travel is car, bus, bike, walk, roller skate. So we're going to ask you those questions. We're also going to ask you about the issues that you see that exist out there today. What are some of the challenges that you have as you travel into work or travel home? And you know, we're going to give you some ideas, but we've also got an open box that lets you type in anything that we may have missed, okay? Because we know that we don't know it all. You guys all travel the corridors probably as much or more than most of us do. So you're going to be able to provide us a lot of great information. Same thing with the solutions. You're going to see very similar level of questions there. And then the demographics information is important for us because it's going to help us understand if there are any key groups that really are focusing their needs differently. So, you know, are the higher income groups focused more on needing additional parking, or the lower income groups more on needing the parking, right? So how are we seeing any patterns there that can help us really focus our attention on different areas of solutions? Okay, so all of the information we're asking you is, in a nutshell, is important for us. And so please, again, you can see the link again at the bottom, and please do take the time to, if you haven't already, go in and take that survey. And if you have taken the survey, again, I'll ask you to reach out to your friends and neighbors and ask them to also take that survey and provide their input. And with that, that is the end of our presentation. We have contact information here directly for Katie, and again, the website for the project. So Emily.
All right, thank you, Michael. I just wanted to reiterate for our question and answer session that you can type your questions or your comments into the chat box. And you can find the chat box by clicking on the conversation cloud icon. I think it's in the bottom center of your screen below the video. And then Emily is going to monitor the chat box and will read your questions aloud to Michael and I so that we can answer them for you.
Great, thank you, Katie and Michael. I know I'm excited to start working on this project and see what comes from it. So we've got a few questions and comments so far. So the first is a comment that the West Sound Cycling Club would be a valuable former member of the Community Sounding Board. Great,
thank you. We actually have one Community Sounding Board spot left for a member of our Complete Streets Committee, which we're working on forming. So once that's formed, we'll get an additional member from that committee. And I believe that West Sound Cycle Club will be on that Complete Streets Committee. So there might be some cross there for us.
There's actually a question related to that. Should a rep from the Complete Streets Committee be in the community focus group, or perhaps that means the Community Sounding Board?
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's exactly. We've got that one spot held. And as soon as we get the Complete Streets Committee up and moving, we should have that all up and running by the time we get to our second sounding board meeting, which is in June.
Great, thank you, Katie. We've got another question. Is a Gorst bypass an option?
All options are on the table. We want to hear all ideas for solutions. So yes.
And that is it so far on questions and comments. All right, we've got another. So local businesses are on the sounding board. I think someone who lives in the closest neighborhood to the base would add tremendous value to the committee.
that's an excellent suggestion. Thank you, Paul. We also have Kevin Gorman on the Community Sounding Board, who is a council member who represents some of the area. So.
While we wait, I know I had a question from the presentation. How long is the survey open?
The survey is open until February 21st.
Good question.
Thank you.
All right, it's a little quiet, so if there's anyone who would rather ask their question verbally instead of typing it, if you want to raise your hand, I can allow you to talk. So I have Rex. I'm going to promote you to talk here.
Needs to make sure unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, before COVID, I was commuting to and from the shipyard from Lacey. The morning commute is not so bad, but the afternoon commute, I'm sure most people know, is horrible. And one of the issues is the interchange from 304 to Highway 3. And I think it's because people drive before the end of the merge lane and backing traffic up, trying to sneak in to the Highway 3 direction. I was wondering if signs can be posted similar to the signs that are installed on the South 101 to SR8 exchange. Basically, the signs show how to properly merge.
I think that's a great suggestion, and we can, for something like that, I think we could go ahead and forward that request to WashDOT for their direct consideration, because that's a pretty, low-hanging fruit item, and we could pass that along to them to consider. Thank you, Rex.
Okay. So if somebody wants to see the sign, all they have to do is drive down where South 101 meets SR8.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rex.
All right, we have some more questions and comments in the chat. So the first is the non-motorized citizens advisory committee can also give good information on linking up to Kitsap County. And then we have another comment from Ed, who is with Kitsap Transit, that we are looking for transit ideas as well.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Rick.
We have a question. Have the shipyard workers been sent the survey?
Yes, the shipyard workers have been sent the survey. We had to do that through the shipyard. So I'm not exactly sure how that was delivered to folks, if it was direct to email or if it was through their unions or through an employee message board. But the shipyard did let us know that they were able to reach out to their workers.
a comment that is on the shipyard homepage.
Great.
So we've got a question from Diane. How does an agency project the future LOS, which I assume means level of service, when the pandemic has affected our new normal and we have young professionals who are not so car centric?
That's a great question. I'm going to let Michael take that one.
Yeah, so we will continue to use the industry standard, which is to develop a transportation forecast methodology that uses the region's travel demand modeling platform and estimate. Really basically what it does is it says how many people are going to be living in the city, how many people are going to be working in the city, and then using existing data and patterns, how do they choose to travel? And it'll be whether they're in a car, and then we'll post-process or work with existing patterns to understand whether people are going to be taking transit or walking and biking. And so there's a little bit of an art to that that we're going to work with, again, with the local expertise, because we're going to have to consider when we recommend new changes to the network connections. So if we assume that we create a really nice bike connection that allows more people to ride their bikes or maybe use a Segway or something to get between locations, we might see an increase that travel demand model process doesn't provide. But we have to use that as our basis. And again, we'll forecast out to the year 2050, as Katie mentioned, using that methodology, and then really work with the local expertise to make sure we refine that to get the right numbers for each of the modes. And I will say this too, one of the things that you ask is about the pre or post pandemic. A lot of the industry is struggling with that question, in that, we saw a dip in demand as a result of the pandemic. It's come back pretty close to where it was prior to the pandemic, still 5 to 10% lower in demand. But our logic is that it's going to keep growing and we will get back to the same level. It just might take a little bit longer. And so our goal is to make sure that we don't underestimate too much and make sure that we're getting the right numbers early. So as I was mentioning earlier, we want to look for those early return projects. What projects are going to give us the best benefit early? And so we'll have time to understand what happens with those longer term forecasts through time, right? So we don't want to make the big investment that could be way out there. We want to make sure we get the right sized investments for the needs today. So that's kind of the conversation and the balancing act that we have to work with. That I think that diagram Katie showed, the circle, that's really the work that we've got to focus on and make sure that we address these questions correctly. Hopefully that answered your question. Please follow up if I didn't quite get it with an additional chat.
Thank you, Michael. It looks like we have someone with their hand up, Rex Nelson.
Okay, we have 2 Rexes tonight. How about that?
We do.
I almost missed him because of that. Okay, I'm going to allow you to talk and ask you to unmute. So you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay. I'm a 30-year resident of Kitsap. And hello, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes,
we got you.
yes.
Okay. I'm a 30-year resident of Kitsap, and the 304 interchange has been a problem for that whole time. Why? Because you have two-lane roads funneling into 2 lanes, which means you got an overcapacity situation on that stretch south of the interchange. One nice thing would be, except this is spendy, would be a bridge across Sinclair Inlet that connects 3 and 16 directly, and then lets the people going on Highway 3 down to Shelton or wherever all alone. Because Gorst is right now, that whole area is such a headache. I live in South Kitsap. I don't go north of Gorst ever, maybe once a year. And it's just, there's no easy solution. And, to me, it seems insane to have a county the size of ours with 1 trunk highway north to south. with all of these thousands of people.
Thank you, Rex. And you know, Tom, if you're still with us, would you like to respond to Rex's and some of the other questions that we've gotten about some of the GORST issues and some of the things that are going on with that?
Yeah, so there was a study that was completed a couple of years ago by WashDOT. It was an SR16 study, and they evaluated different alternatives to address the bottleneck. It's called the GORST bottleneck, but it's really, it starts at 304 and it goes basically all the way around through GORST to basically to Highway 166. The preferred alternative that was identified by WashDOT in that study was improved capacity along the same alignment as Highway 3 right now, additional lanes in each direction. And there's a move afoot right now. Bremerton's an active member in it to move forward a funding request for federal and state funds to give that funding to WashDOT to be able to implement the improvements. So the bridge across Sinclair Inlet, it was considered but rejected early on by WashDOT in that evaluation. But they're looking at capacity improvements through the corridor. They're looking at redundancy improvements through the corridor, and they're also looking at resiliency improvements through the corridor. And what resiliency means is the ability to withstand earthquakes and elevated sea levels and things like that. And so it's actively being worked on right now.
Thank you, Tom. And Tom is the City of Bremerton's Public Works Director.
All right, thank you, Tom. We've got some more questions in the chat box. So one up here that I forgot to do. Sorry if I missed it, but did you cover schedule of the study? Perhaps
Yes.
If someone missed a part of the presentation, how would you find that information?
Yes, we did cover the schedule, and this webinar is being recorded, so it will be posted onto the city's project webpage within the next couple of days. In addition, we will also post separately just the PowerPoint so that you can take a look at that quickly if you would like.
Great, thank you. We've got a few questions about different modes of transportation, so I'll try to maybe combine these if I can. Is the goal to accommodate all modes of transportation equally, or will there be considerations to push in a certain direction that may negatively impact some modes? How will those decisions be made?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I would go back to that graphic that shows kind of the balance between all of the modes and what we would be attempting to try and balance it. I would add, though, that that the Puget Sound Regional Council has a planning document called Vision 2050, which will affect the city's comprehensive plans and, all the comprehensive plans for cities and towns in the region, counties. There are policies within that document that do kind of affect what modes. So there's more focus on transit and active transportation than cars. So those are some issues that we'll be keeping in mind as we go through the study. Michael, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I was going to say that I love this question because it depending on let's see, if I start down at the lowest level looking at a roadway or a specific location, the answer is we'll probably focus on one mode over another. because that connectivity in that specific location might be better accommodated by, say, a sidewalk improvement and or access control or something to that effect. And so that for that section, it might be specifically for non-motorized transit. If you pick it up another level, if we propose something else where the vehicles are benefited, then that next level is going to see some improvements for traffic. And so ultimately, when we get up to we're looking at the city as a whole, that's where we're going to see, our goal is to see the circle. As you get lower and focus more on specific areas, it's going to be tainted more to one mode than another, right? Because in different areas of the city, there are different priorities. And so that's what we're going to have to focus on, is what really fits with the area and the needs, and today even what's missing and needs some equitable improvement. So that's kind of the goal that we have. So it's not a one size fits all at all levels of our evaluation. And again, it's going to be the balancing. And then how are those decisions made? That's going to be a lot of conversation between, again, all of the groups that are going to be involved. And we're going to look at how can we get more people to their jobs and back? How do we do that without degrading livability, or even better, how do we do that by improving livability? And how can we do that with a reasonable cost that allows us to deliver quickly? So there's a lot of things that are going to be in balance, and we won't know the answers really until we get out there towards that fifth meeting, right? Because it's a progress of balancing and understanding and pulling in data. So we are going to ask your patience, and again, keep giving us your ideas so that we can run these through that process.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Looks like Tom has his hand up.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks. I was watching the chat bar and I saw that my response kind of spurred a couple extra questions regarding active transportation, bike lanes, those sorts of things. So I wanted to say that the white paper on the GORST solution is still being developed, but shared use paths connecting SR 166, 304, 3 and Jarstead Park Trailhead are listed as goals on that document. Specifically where they go and how they connect is something that would be developed as one of the early phases of the project, but it is absolutely a project goal. So I wanted to make sure that that was stated. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
So we've got a question up here. What is the plan for balancing policy-driven initiatives versus the need to address concurrency issues?
That is a fantastic question. You guys have some excellent questions for us tonight. And I think it is policy, so that kind of it becomes something that we need to talk, especially with our community sounding board. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they're so important to this process, is that, if we are talking about accepting a lower level of service, as this person has suggested, we need to vet that with policymakers. Michael, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's right on, Katie, that, the conversation is going to be about so we're going to kind of, I guess I always think of it, we want to kind of separate ourselves a little bit from that policy, and we want to drive I shouldn't use that word, but we want to focus on what are the solutions that meet the needs for the people, right? And how do we get that balance? And we want to answer those questions without cost being an issue yet, right? So we want to focus on the real solutions first. And then our next question is, how much does it cost and can we afford it? And is there a policy that has to change in order to be successful? And if that policy is going to take time and a lot of conversation, that project isn't going to come off the table, but it might delay a little bit. So those are, again, as we get out there closer to meeting 5, these are going to be really important conversations that we have, but definitely in consideration as we select the preferred alternatives.
Great, thank you. I think we've covered most of the questions on different modes of transportation, but if I did not cover your question, feel free to pop back into the chat box. So Tom addressed the Gorst questions. All right, we've got a comment here. I would like to feel safe riding my bike on errands around the city. Will there be plans for expanding bike parking and safe bike and pedestrian corridors on the major east-west and north-south corridors through the city?
Yes, we will be looking at all modes of transportation, and that includes bike mobility. One of the ways that we'll be evaluating the roads in Bremerton is actually to give them a rating, a safety rate, or Michael, maybe you can describe it a little bit better for me, for the group. The rating on how safe people feel using different modes of transportation that we'll be using.
Yeah, it'll be the stress rating to understand if there's a lot of traffic and maybe just a very narrow sidewalk and no shoulder. Probably not going to get a lot of cyclists. Maybe the hardcore commuter, but you're not going to get family-friendly kind of cycling going on. And so our goal is going to be to look at where are those stressors within the system, where do people want to, where are they starting, where are they going, and how can we find the right paths for people to be able to get where they want to go. So we're going to look at the stressors, understand if there's a way we can reduce those. If not, is there an alternate route for them to go or to take? And how can we develop that? So there's, again, a lot more conversation that's going to happen. And this, just go back to the schedule that somebody missed, but there's going to be a long period between now and kind of the June timeframe where we're setting up again that foundation. We're going to be trying to get the right data to answer these questions in that next meeting. So we're going to really set that all up and have information that we can, again, answer those questions and start to develop the right solutions. So that's our goal. Great questions. I like this group.
Yeah.
Thank you. We do have someone with their hand up, Charles.
Okay.
Right. So I have a concern that every time when we create studies and it takes a lot of time to do so, then it puts everything on hold and we don't move forward possibly with what could be good, in my perspective, non-motorized transportation projects that we know they're good, we know they're a no-brainer. Does this study, is it going to put all these well identified projects on hold? So we got to wait till the study's over with? Or how are you going to balance that and how are you going to manage it?
Thank you. That is a great question, and I totally understand your frustration with it. We have a ton of projects on the docket right now that are going to improve active transportation and mobility. They're not on hold for this project. Let me give you some examples. We have a bike lane improvement project on Kitsap Way that will be constructed this year. We're working on the design for a shared use path along Warren Avenue Bridge. That's under design right now. We're currently designing road improvements for Naval from the Navy Gate all the way to 15th Street. And we'll be actively pursuing construction funding for both the Naval project and the Warren Avenue Bridge project. So those are things that are going on outside of this project. Tom, are there others that you can think of that I'm missing?
Yep, couple. We're actually this year we're also constructing bike lanes in the downtown area, and also on Austin Drive. And I'll take a look as soon as we get going here again on our city's website. We have a construction map that's really helpful, actually. We post it every year, and it lists out all the active projects that we're working on for construction in the current year. It doesn't show what we're working on design on, but we have, I can just tell you that every transportation project that we work on has a strong consideration given to active transportation options, and most of them have bike lanes. Shorewood Drive, there's a utility project that's being constructed up Shorewood Drive. We're actually, from Kitsap Way, we're widening the shoulder on Shorewood Drive to provide much better, safer pedestrian and bicycle access. That's another project that's moving forward this year. So yeah, we're nothing's on hold. We're moving forward. You know, the goal of this study is going to be, a plan for a very well integrated network of options for active transportation through, the downtown area connecting to the shipyard. And this is going to leverage additional evaluation that's done with the update to the transportation element of our comprehensive plan. So I can't tell you how excited I am about this study and then the follow-on studies that go with this, because it's really going to set the stage for transportation improvements in the city, through my lifetime probably. So it's pretty neat.
Will it come out with a decision about 6th versus 11th Street road diets?
That's being evaluated with us, and we're planning on implementing that. But we're going to be. I can tell you about the schedule for that. It'll be evaluated with this project. We have we've secured. We built a third of the improvements on 6th Street last year. This year we're constructing another third, and we've got construction funding. I think in 2024. I think it might be 23. For the last phase, and ideally we would confirm the selection of the rechannelization on 6th with that, and then implement the bike lanes with the rechannelization, aka road diet, at that time. So hopefully we can move that forward, but right now that's when the funding's available.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, I'm going to go back to the chat. We've got a question about parking. Are there plans for increased affordable parking downtown, maybe more garages?
We'll be evaluating parking, first of all. Thank you for the question about parking, because parking is part of this study. And we understand that parking is an issue in Bremerton. And we have plans to evaluate that as part of this study. It's going to be a balanced approach in looking at parking. So we need to look at the needs for parking and where we could put the parking and how that affects the system as a whole. So right now, definitely on the table. That's what I'll say. Michael, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that, at this time, that's really about it, Katie. We do have it on the plans, and it is part of the system as it was shown in the overall balance.
Thank you. We have a question. Are you looking at example cities for different modes? I know the Dutch have cycling figured out. Maybe other cities are great at walkability, and others that have dealt with huge commuter stress like the shipyard. Are we looking to proven solutions that already exist?
Absolutely. I think we're looking inside the box and outside the box. And we have, some representation on our community sounding board from WashDOT, some people who specialize in commute trip reduction. So we hope to get some good feedback from them. And Michael, maybe you want to add a little bit to that.
Yeah, and we also on our team, we have experts in the active transportation connectivity. And so they will be bringing in their expertise from all over the West Coast for sure. And they'll also have been reading the studies from outside of the United States, and they'll bring that information in as it's applicable. Sometimes, you look at other countries and it sounds like it should be easy to put here, but sometimes it just doesn't fit. But we will definitely consider all of those solutions and possible benefits for those types of connections. So that's why we brought that expertise onto the team, is to make sure we've got a good understanding.
And we've just got a comment that the West Sound Cycling Club appreciates the direction the city is taking with multimodal transportation. It looks like Charles has his hand up again.
Yes, I wondered if the parking study portion of the study is going to include electric vehicle charging. And in particular, there's legislation pending right now that by 2030, there will be no more brand new gasoline or diesel powered automobiles sold in the state of Washington, which should gradually increase the demand for electric vehicle charging. So is that going to be looked at as part of the study?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that. That's a great question. And actually something that I'm kind of tuned into, because one of my roles at the city is to represent the mayor on the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency board. And so through that work, I've become more aware of the efforts to electrify our transportation systems. And actually there's a PSRC is putting on a webinar that I'll be attending later this week about that subject. So it's definitely something that's developing quickly, and something that we're going to have to consider as part of this study.
Great, thank you, Katie. We've got a question in the chat. Are there plans to look at expanding and increasing the frequency of bus routes around the city and Kitsap County?
Kitsap Transit is on our community sounding board, and we regard them as one of our most important partners for this project. I think transit is an essential part of that graphic. It's one of our solutions. It's got to be part of the balance. And one of the things that we hear quite often is that, especially in Kitsap County, frequency is an issue, and it's a barrier for people using it. So, and I see here in the chat that Ed Coviello, he's from Kitsap Transit. He's on our community sounding board, and he's answered here for us as well.
Yeah, for those who can't see the chat, I'll just go ahead and read it out loud. It said, yes, there's a long-range planning study now that will look at this. It will display what the cost will be to implement more frequent transit. There will be a public outreach process this spring and summer.
Thanks, Ed.
I don't see any more comments or questions in the chat. Of course, please let me know if I missed your question.
Well, it looks like we've gotten just about all of our questions. Oh, I see one more just popped up, I think.
Oh, yes. As a ferry commuter, I appreciate what Bremerton has done in the last few years for that mode. As a bicycle commuter, I appreciate your upcoming work.
Well, thanks, Jake. We appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you all so much for your time and your thoughtful feedback tonight. It really has been a great meeting. Some really great comments and questions. All of these comments will be used during the study and will be included in our final plan report. And this, again, this online meeting was recorded and will be posted on the project webpage. So if you're talking with your friends about it, send them a link and they can check it out. And definitely send them a link to that survey, because we would love to get as many responses as possible on that survey.
See, one more question came in.
We do have another question. Are you looking into long-term funding?
I think we, for funding of the projects, one of the great things about this particular grant is that we were granted this money from the Department of Defense specifically to address challenges in this community that that are unique to the fact that we have a base here. And that opens us up to some other funding opportunities. So once we have a list of solutions, we'll be able to pursue those special grant opportunities that aren't necessarily available to other communities. So that's a really fantastic thing about this grant and about the fact that we are a defense community, and that the Department of Defense is committed to supporting us in this and making sure that their mission is met here in Bremerton.
Did have a comment from Ed at Kitsap Transit that for transit, our long-range plan will identify the funding gaps to implement transit improvements.
Excellent, thank you. All right. Thank you all. I think we had a great meeting this evening, and I think we're about ready to sign out. So, I just want to thank everyone again. And like I said, please take that survey, please share it with your friends, and please come back to our next open house. It'll be sometime probably in the summer or maybe early fall. So we'll be back at it again. So we hope to see you all again.